At exactly 3:17 hours on April 3, 2026, the Strait of Hormuz stopped being a waterway and became a kill zone. 34 days into the most explosive US-Iran military confrontation since the Gulf War, the narrowest strategic chokepoint on Earth, 21 nautical miles of dark, mine-laced water separating Iran from Oman, had already swallowed 3 commercial tankers, paralyzed 95% of global oil transit, and closed the airspace above it to every civilian aircraft on the planet. But what was about to happen in the next 19 minutes would push the entire region to the absolute brink of a regional catastrophe that no diplomatic channel, no UN Security Council resolution, and no presidential speech could have walked back. It started, as these things always do, with something small. A single AN/APS-153 radar contact, low, fast, erratic, flickering at the edge of the USS Abraham Lincoln's E-2D Advanced Hawkeye's detection envelope, approximately 38 nautical miles northeast of the carrier's position in the Gulf of Oman. The Lincoln's carrier air wing had already flown 210 combat sorties in the previous 96 hours, hitting IRGCN coastal battery emplacements, Shahab-3 mobile launch rails, and underground hardened bunkers at Bandar Abbas. The crew was running on adrenaline and stimulants. The Tactical Operations Center was hot, noisy, and saturated with threat data. In that cacophony of red icons and blaring alerts, the contact almost didn't register. Almost. It was a petty officer second class, a 24-year-old from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who flagged the return. Not because his augmented SPY-6 radar told him to, but because, in his words later in the debrief, it moved wrong. It moved the way a IRGCN Blade Runner class fast attack craft moves when it believes no one is watching, flat on the water, acceleration in bursts, using the electromagnetic shadow cast by a Liberian-flagged chemical tanker to suppress its radar cross-section. He was right, and what he had detected was not one contact. It was the lead element of a 14-vessel Wolf-Pack ambush, the largest coordinated Iranian naval offensive action in the 35-year history of the U.S. Fifth Fleet. What you are about to hear is what happened in the next 19 minutes, and why it will define the rules of naval warfare in the 21st century. 0317-04. The Abraham Lincoln CIC, the Combat Information Center, erupts as the N/SPY-6 V-1 AMDR radar array, the most powerful shipborne radar ever deployed on a U.S. carrier, simultaneously resolves not one but 14 surface contacts materializing from 3 separate vectors at bearing 35, 67, and 112. The contacts are moving at speeds between 42 and 58 knots. They are using terrain masking, or in this case, tanker masking, exploiting the cluttered radar environment created by 4 stationary merchant vessels that Iran had deliberately anchored in a fan pattern across the strait over the preceding 72 hours. Prepositioned, deliberate, calculated. Simultaneously, the Lincoln's AN/SQQ-89A undersea warfare system registers an anomalous transient acoustic signature at bearing 201. The faint, unmistakable cavitation harmonic of a propeller accelerating at depth. The signature is consistent with a Kilo-class submarine, or, as American intelligence analysts would confirm 11 hours later, something far more concerning. A Type 39B Yuan-class diesel-electric submarine, believed to have been quietly transferred to the IRGCN as part of a covert naval arrangement with Beijing that the CIA had been tracking for 6 weeks, and had judged to be 3 months from operational deployment. They were 3 months wrong. At the same time, and this is the element that makes this ambush a masterclass in multi-domain kill chain engineering, the Lincoln's and /SLQ-32 V-6 SCWIP electronic warfare system detects a sudden, massive electromagnetic burst across the J and Ku frequency bands. An Iranian ground-based electronic warfare node at Keshem Island, later identified as an upgraded Casta 2E2 system, operating in conjunction with a Chinese-supplied DZ-1000 GPS spoofing array, fires a coordinated yield salvo directly into the strike group's tactical data network. Link 16 begins to stutter. IFF interrogation responses from the Combat Air Patrol F/A-18FS on the Lincoln's flight deck start returning corrupted handshake packets. For 11 seconds that felt like 11 hours to every officer in that CIC, the most powerful carrier strike group on the planet was effectively blind, deaf, and electronically isolated. 11 seconds. Enough time for a 58-knot fast attack craft to close 300 meters. Enough time for a 530 threme torpedo tube to cycle open at depth. The Iranians had not built this ambush in a week. They had spent 4 months constructing it, piece by piece, using the accumulated intelligence from 24 civilian merchant vessels, their own shadow fleet, that had been quietly mapping the Lincoln's patrol patterns, its CAP rotations, its refueling intervals, and the timing windows between E-2D Hawkeye orbit changeovers. They knew that between 3:10 and 3:25 hours, the strike group would be in a 6-minute sensor transition window when Hawkeye callsign Sentry 62 departed station, and Sentry 63 had not yet reached its assigned orbit altitude. A 6-minute window. They were launching their entire offensive inside it. What they did not know, what their 4 months of surveillance had never revealed, was that the Lincoln Strike Group commander, a vice admiral with 28 years of naval aviation behind him and 2 previous Fifth Fleet deployments, had been running a classified exercise called Hormuz Anvil for the preceding 9 days. He had read the intelligence on the Yuan-class transfer. He had read the report on the Casta 2E2 activation at Keshem. He had already gamed this exact scenario, a multi-axis, multi-domain ambush inside the strait, 22 times in simulation. And 19 days ago, he had quietly repositioned 2 elements of his strike group that no Iranian reconnaissance asset had been able to track. The first was a Virginia-class fast attack submarine, USS New Mexico, SSN 779, running ultra-quiet at 400 feet on a north-south patrol track directly beneath the expected axis of any submerged Iranian approach. It had been in position for 11 days. It had not pinged. It had not communicated. It had done nothing except listen, map, and wait, building a complete acoustic profile of the Iranian Yuan-class as it crept south through the strait's thermal layer. The second was a full squadron of MQ-25 Stingray unmanned aerial tankers and MQ-4C Triton maritime patrol drones operating from a classified forward operating location on the Omani coast. Not under U.S. command, technically, but fully integrated into the Lincoln's tactical data network through a separate, hardened, frequency-hopping communications architecture that ran on a completely different waveband from the Link 16 network. The Iranian yield system had just attacked. While the Iranians were congratulating themselves on blinding the Lincoln's primary data network, the Tritons were already painting every one of the 14 fast attack craft with their ANZPY-3 MFAS multifunction active sensor radar, cross-skewing targeting solutions directly to the SM-6 vertical launch cells of the USS Thomas Hudner, DDG-116, positioned at the northern edge of the carrier's defensive zone. 0317-52. The Lincoln's CIC restores full Link 16 connectivity as the yield team activates a backup frequency protocol, and the SCWIP Block 3 system counterjams the Keshem yield node, flooding it with a reciprocal jamming pulse that physically burns out 3 of its 6 receiving antenna arrays. The 11-second blackout is over. And in those 11 seconds, the Lincoln has not lost a single targeting solution because those solutions were never on Link 16. They were on the Triton network. The Iranians jammed a ghost. Vampire, multiple surface contacts, weapons-free authorized, Aegis to auto special. The order from the strike group commander is cold, flat, and absolute. 0318, 11. The USS Thomas Hudner's Mk-41 VLS erupts. 4 RIM-174 IRBM standard missiles 6 rounds ignite in sequential 1-second intervals, their solid rocket boosters punching pillars of white fire into the pre-dawn sky. The SM-6 is not just an air defense weapon in this engagement. It is operating in its surface warfare mode, guided by Triton targeting data, its active radar seeker locking onto the lead formation of Blade Runner fast attack craft at a distance of 28 nautical miles. Each warhead carries a 137-pound blast fragmentation warhead. At the terminal phase, the missiles achieve Mach 3.5. The 3 lead Iranian fast attack craft simply cease to exist. Simultaneously, on the flight deck of the Lincoln, 4 FA-18E Super Hornets that had been sitting on Alert 5, engines already spooling, pilots already helmeted, are launched in emergency interval. 28 seconds from Vampire, call to first catapult stroke. The catapult officer doesn't even have time to give the traditional thumb up. He just fires the cat. 0319-03. The Yuan-class submarine, having heard the chaos erupt above it, makes its move. Its commander, operating under orders to fire his RM-533E anti-ship torpedo at the Lincoln the moment the surface attack commenced, opens his forward tubes and begins a firing solution computation. He does not know about the New Mexico. He does not know that the New Mexico has had a complete acoustic track on him for the last 11 days and has already computed a Mk-48 ADCAP torpedo intercept solution that is refreshed and ready to execute within 4 seconds of any hostile weapon release. What the Iranian submarine commander hears next, transmitted at extreme volume through the water at bearing 180 directly beneath his boat, is 235 decibels of AN BQQ-10 active sonar. Not a gentle ranging ping, an active localization blast at full power, the kind that makes the pressure hull ring like a bell, that whites out every sonar operator's screen with static, that shakes loose unsecured equipment, and that communicates one message with absolute clarity. We know exactly where you are. We have been watching you for 11 days. Do not fire. The Iranian submarine does not fire. Its commander, realizing he has been sitting in the crosshairs of an invisible American boat for God knows how long, begins an emergency ballast blow to surface. Surrender protocol, the most humiliating thing a submarine commander can do. 0319-47. The remaining 11 Iranian fast attack craft, now deprived of their 3 lead units, their yield coverage destroyed, their submarine neutralized, attempt a tactical withdrawal at maximum speed toward Bandar Abbas. This is when the Super Hornets catch them. The 4 FA-18Es, now at 18,000 feet and accelerating through Mach 1.1, release a total of 8 AGM-84H Slamiar standoff land attack missiles in air-to-surface mode, retargeted in real time against the fast attack craft using man-in-the-loop satellite data link. Slamiar in surface engagement mode, guided by AN/AAS-52 FLIR imagery at 65 miles of range, is not a weapon that a 42-knot speedboat outruns. 7 of the 8 missiles find their targets. The 8th is deliberately retargeted at the last second when a fishing dhow is detected in the warhead's terminal seeker field. The missile self-destructs. Rules of engagement hold. Even in the middle of an ambush that could have sunk an aircraft carrier, an American weapons officer takes the time to protect a fisherman. 0321-33. It is over. In 4 minutes and 29 seconds, the IRGCN Wolfpack, 2 years in planning, 4 months in rehearsal, has been reduced to burning debris and a surface submarine raising a white flag at periscope depth. But the battle is not over. Because at 3:17 hours, at the exact moment the ambush launched, 2 separate IRGCN coastal defense batteries at Bandar Abbas and on the island of Greater Tunb, nor anti-ship missile systems derived from the Chinese C-802 and capable of Mach 0.8 at sea-skimming altitude, fired a total of 6 missiles at the Lincoln strike group. The Nor is a difficult target. It flies at 5 meters above the sea surface. Its radar cross-section is small. And the IRGCN had deliberately time-coordinated its launch with the Yeo blackout. 4 of the 6 missiles are destroyed by the Lincoln's evolved Sea Sparrow missile batteries. 1 is destroyed by the USS Thomas Hudner's 20 phalanx CIWS in last-ditch point defense, the distinctive buzzsaw roar of the 6-barrel cannon audible from the flight deck as it fires 4,500 rounds per minute in a 2-second burst. The 6th missile does not hit the Lincoln. It hits the stern of a U.S. Navy fuel replenishment vessel, USNS Laramie, TAO-203, operating 12 nautical miles astern of the carrier. The impact opens a 6-meter gash in the hull above the waterline. 7 U.S. Navy sailors are wounded, 2 critically. The Laramie does not sink. Her crew controls the damage with textbook damage control procedures and keeps her underway. But it is the 7th event, the one that had already happened before the ambush even launched, that will haunt the Pentagon and dominate every news broadcast on Earth for the next 72 hours. At 2:41 hours, 36 minutes before the ambush, an FA-18F Super Hornet, callsign Nighthawk 42, assigned to VFA 103 Jolly Rogers, was flying a strike package escort mission over the Zagros mountain approaches northwest of Bandar Abbas. At 0241:18, the aircraft was hit by an Iranian Rod-2 radar-guided air-to-air missile fired from a MiG-29 operating in total electromagnetic silence, guided entirely by off-board track data fed from a ground radar and transmitted by data link, meaning the MiG's own radar never lit up and Nighthawk 42's radar warning receiver gave 0 alert. The FA-18F went down in the Zagros foothills at high speed. The pilot, callsign Raptor, successfully ejected and was recovered by a combat search and rescue helicopter at 5:09 hours after evading an IRGC ground patrol for 87 minutes in near-complete darkness, using only his survival radio and a personal locator beacon. The weapons systems officer, the backseater callsign Ghost, was not with him. Ghost's ejection seat had functioned. His parachute had opened. But where he had landed and whether he was alive, captured, or worse, was, as of the time of this broadcast, unknown. The U.S. military had confirmed only that search assets were active, that the area had significant IRGC ground presence, and that efforts to locate the missing service member were ongoing. A second combat search and rescue package, 4 MH-60R Seahawks supported by 2 EA-18G Growlers and a full fighter escort, had already launched from the Lincoln. Every asset in the U.S. Fifth Fleet, a carrier strike group battered but unbroken, was now pointed at one mission, one American, somewhere in the dark mountains of southern Iran. What would you do? If you commanded that CSAR package, flying into defended Iranian airspace, hunting for one man, with every IRGC radar in the country now active and hunting for you, do you press in? Comment 1 if you think they get him out. Comment 2 if you think this escalates to the most dangerous moment of the entire war. Because here is the truth that no press briefing will tell you. The moment that FA-18F went down, the mathematics of this war changed permanently. This is no longer a strike campaign. It is no longer a systematic degradation of Iranian military capability. The instant an American aviator is missing in hostile territory, every other military objective becomes secondary to one imperative that is hardwired into the DNA of U.S. military culture from the first day of basic training to the last breath of the last 4-star admiral. You do not leave Americans behind. The IRGC knows this. They have always known this. A missing pilot is not a tragedy to them. It is a strategic lever. If they capture Ghost, they gain a negotiating chip that no amount of cruise missile strikes can neutralize. If he is publicly displayed alive in a prison jumpsuit, the domestic political pressure on the Trump administration from every direction will be seismic. The mission will shift. The tempo will shift. And Iran, which has now absorbed 34 days of the most sustained U.S. air and naval bombardment since Operation Iraqi Freedom, will have achieved something it could not achieve with a single missile. It will have put a human face on American vulnerability. The U.S. military understands this calculus with cold precision, which is why the CSAR package launched from the Lincoln does not look like a search and rescue operation. It looks like a raid. 4 MH-60 Seahawks flying nap of the earth at 200 feet through a mountain pass. EA-18G Growlers painting every Iranian radar frequency with targeted jamming. FA-18Es flying top cover at altitude with AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles on the rails, range gated to engage any airborne threat within 100 nautical miles. An E-2D Hawkeye overhead managing the airspace deconfliction. And flying 40 miles ahead of the package, an RQ-4C Global Hawk surveillance drone using its MS-177 multispectral sensor ball to scan the mountain terrain in infrared, building a real-time thermal map of every heat source, human, vehicle, campfire, in a 20-kilometer radius around Ghost's last known parachute impact point. At 5:58 hours, the Global Hawk finds a thermal signature, human-sized, stationary, in a narrow creek bed at an elevation of 2,200 meters, approximately 47 kilometers east of Nighthawk 42's calculated ejection zone. The signature is alive. It is not moving, but it is alive. The CSAR package adjusts its track. The lead Seahawk drops to 80 feet above the ridgeline. The PJ, a U.S. Air Force pararescueman, one of the most highly trained combat rescue specialists on the planet, checks his HK-416 and his medical kit and says nothing. He has done this before. He will do it again, and he will bring Ghost home, or he will not come home himself. What followed? The 11-minute hot extraction from a defended Iranian mountain position, the wounding of one PJ and one Seahawk crew chief, the destruction of an IRGC truck convoy by a laser-guided GBU-54, dropped from an FA-18E with precision that preserved a 30-meter protective radius around the rescue helicopter, is a story that deserves its own video. A story of what American military power looks like when it is pointed at saving one human being instead of destroying infrastructure. Ghost was recovered at 6:09 hours local time, April 4, 2026. He had a fractured left leg from the landing, a laceration across his left forearm, and signs of mild hypothermia from a night in the Iranian mountain cold. He was coherent. He was alive. And the first thing he said to the PJ who reached him was not a tactical report. It was 2 words: "Thanks, man." The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Iran has lost 14 fast attack craft, 1 submarine forced to surface, 6 Nord missile launchers destroyed in subsequent strikes, and a significant portion of its coastal electronic warfare infrastructure at Keshem Island. 7 American sailors are wounded. 1 American aircraft is lost. The USNS Laramie is undergoing emergency repairs. The Lincoln Strike Group is still on station. And somewhere in Tehran, in a command bunker that has survived 34 days of U.S. strikes, the men who planned this ambush are looking at the results and realizing that they built the most sophisticated multi-domain naval trap in the history of the IRGCN, and the United States Navy walked out the other side of it. Not unscathed, but unbowed. The lesson of the Strait of Hormuz is not that Iran failed. It is that Iran showed the world everything it had: its submarine, its wolf packs, its GPS spoofing, its off-board missile guidance, its prepositioned ambush geometry. And the United States had already mapped every single element, built a counter to it, and positioned that counter in the water 11 days before the attack. The intelligence collection alone, the classified picture that allowed the USS New Mexico to sit quietly beneath that Yuan class for 11 days without being detected. represents the product of thousands of hours of work by analysts, cryptologists, and collection assets across every domain of American intelligence power. You are watching, in real time, the difference between a military that has spent 40 years building the most integrated, networked, multi-domain warfighting machine in human history, and a military that is brave, determined, resourceful, and fundamentally outmatched at the systems level. Iran fought with ferocity in the Strait of Hormuz on April 3, 2026. Iran fought with courage and with strategic creativity, and Iran lost. The strait is still closed. The oil is still not flowing. The war is not over. But the Iranian plan to use a catastrophic strike on a U.S. carrier as a political event that would force Washington to negotiate from a position of shock. That plan died in 4 minutes and 29 seconds against the combined weight of a Virginia-class submarine, an Arleigh Burke destroyer's SM-3 battery, 4 Super Hornets, and a 24-year-old petty officer from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who noticed that a radar return moved wrong. The rules of this strait, of every strait, every choke point, every nautical mile of water on the surface of this planet, are written by those who have the patience to listen before they strike, the technology to see through darkness and deception, and the will to go back in for the one they left behind. Today, they went back in. Today, they brought him home. The next 72 hours will determine whether this ambush becomes a footnote or a trigger. The stakes have never been higher. The margin has never been thinner. And the world is watching every blip on that radar screen, waiting to see who blinks first. Stay sharp. Stay informed. And never mistake American restraint for American unreadiness. Because somewhere in the Gulf of Oman right now, a carrier strike group is already planning the next strike. And they already know exactly where the next trap is being set.